Hi, this is specifically for my Vicar Braam, and so this is a session on principles and that sort of thing in chess, prepared for Braam specifically, but anyone may wish to watch, and I don't do outtakes for that because I won't do an outtake. So anyway, here we've got a typical chess position. This is the starting position, and incidentally the computer, if we ask the computer who's winning at this stage, it's about 0.001 in white's favour or so, because white obviously gets the first move. Now it's very important, if you can see my mouse here, these four squares here, Braam, okay? They're very important, but they're not a means to themselves, but they're very important squares on the chessboard, because if we have our pieces in the center and not on the flanks, all lined up along the flanks or on the back rank or something, if we have our pieces in the center, then they can go from what's called the queen side, from here, to the king side. I know that sounds a bit silly, but these can maneuver quicker to from the queen side to the king side, which is where the king is. Okay, quicker to the king side, which is in this vicinity or this area, than they can if they're here. If they're here, if this knight's here, the knight moves in a 3 in an L shape. It can reach the king side in 2 moves now, not 1. And here even it can only reach the king side, the line in the center for like soccer or hockey or rugby and that sort of thing. The knight cannot get to the king side without making 2 moves at least. If it wants to take its time, it might go here and here and then here or here. So to maneuver from here to the king side on the flank is more difficult for a knight, primarily speaking, than it is if it's in the center. So if a knight is sitting here, it can go from the king side to the queen side in one fell swoop. Whereas if it's in here or here or here or here or here or here, etc., then it has to take, if it wants to, 2 moves to get to the queen side. So why do I say that? Well, because time is very important in chess in a few ways. First of all, we have a chess clock that times us and stops us from being too long about our game of chess, which we lose the game of chess if we go over the time limit. And also time is important in chess, because if we muck around in chess and we don't try to move as quickly as possible, for one thing, in the start of the game we need to get active very quickly. Now if we don't get active very quickly in the start of the game, then it's usual that our opponent will have the advantage if they're as good as us or a wee bit better. They will get the advantage if they get ready and they get to the second stage of the game, which, don't worry, there's only 3 stages of the game. There's the opening, the middle game, and the end game. Very simple, eh? Opening, middle game, and the end game. And so the opening is one stage, the middle game is the second stage, and the third stage is the end game. Now what are they all about? The opening is exactly that, is opening up the position, because at the moment only knights for white and pawns can move, and same vice versa for black. Black cannot ever move the bishop out here because there's no opening position for that bishop to travel out of. Now this may be elementary, but I'm trying to explain the main stages of chess for a very certain reason. So the opening is to play it as, you know, to get your pieces active other than your king, and your queen doesn't want to be too active. She wants to sort of almost be high, and the rooks, they tend to sort of want to sit back a bit, and the king wants to go somewhere safe where it's got protection of pawns, primarily speaking, but it's not a rule. So your king you want to put away somewhere safe. Now a common mistake even that my juniors do, Braam, is they move their pawns out here to get their rooks out. Now this might look like quite a good idea, but rooks are prone to bishops. I'll give you an example. See the red line? See the red line? When I go here, see the red line? And that red line indicates a reason why it's a red line, is because the computer would consider white in a 1 position as soon as they take this rook. See, it's red line, even though it's shown. So now it would be foolhardy of black to ignore this capture. It would be best to capture this way. If it captures with the pawn, then we've got 2 pawns that are on the same file, as it's called in chess, and these pawns just like have to wait for the other one to move before they can move, and they don't really like that in chess. So this would be knight takes bishop, but the bishop that white has just given up is less value than the rook on h8. The rook that moved from here, okay, we're going to able to go backwards. The rook, when it moves up here, is better value by 2 points than the bishop, which is worth 3 points, and the rook is worth 5 points. So this is not a good idea for black to do this sort of things, because also when the knight takes this bishop, the knight is now on the edge of the universe again. It has to move 1, 2 squares to get to the queen side if it so wishes. Not to say that it's got any business over there, but it's not in a central square like here or here if there's no pawn there. It's better here or here, but it's not a rule. You don't have to only play your knights to there or there, and there for white, or there and there for white for this knight here. This the knights can move to the flank, but they are better in the centre, and so black's position would be considered lost because they are material down. White has a rook for their bishop, so this would be advantage white. If it was tennis, that's what we'd be saying. So it's not ideal, even though it's very popular for junior players, no matter what ages they are, to its usual and common place that one moves their rooks out this way, like a kind of an envelope maneuver, okay? But when we're playing a good player, they're going to chomp at the bit quite quickly. So we can just go forward with the mouse, and that's going to be the usual move that white will play if they're reasonably good at chess. And so they're going to say, well, I've got this game won already, even though I still have to win it. So here we've got just a line here. Now we're going to play equal central move here from black's hand. Now this is the opening situation of the game. Now obviously this pawn is in the way of this bishop, and this pawn is in the way of that bishop, but we really want to get these pieces out, and we want to do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And as I've mentioned, if we don't do that in chess, then if we're playing a better opponent or an equal opponent to us, we might just play for a million years, or we might just be able to beat the other person if they aren't ready in the game like we are when we get to the middle game. So we're in the opening. So the opening is to get all these pieces like the bishop, the knight, and the queen off the back rank, which this is the back rank for white, and this is the back rank for black, and this is the square I told you about, which is A1, always from white's left hand side. This square is A1, so even if you just learn this, it's fantastic, because then you can play chess in your head, which is really, really hard, but you will be able to do it. So you've got A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8. Pretty basic, hey? B1, C1, D1, E1, F1, G1, H1, F8, E8, D8, C8, B8, and so on. So these squares are just, as I've already mentioned to you, this row here, all this row is the A file. All this row is the B file, even though there's no rook on it. All this row is the C file. All this row is the D file, according to white's left-hand position. All this is the E file, and so forth, F file, G file, H file. And so the same for black. This is the A file for black. This is the B file for black. C file for black, and the names of the maps of the squares of the board are all the same, no matter when or what the game is, or what the position is of the pieces. These are finite squares from white's left hand side as A1 to H1 to H2, G2, F2, E2, D4, so that's D4, and C2 and B2 and A2, etc. So I don't want to bore you with that too much. I'm very conscious of doing that. I don't want to do that for my Vicar, but all I want to impress upon you is this is the opening. Now, so we will try to get our pieces out real quickly. Okay, now so we'll just, don't worry about what I'm not trying to show you anything here. I'm just trying to show the idea of what players want to do at the start of the game, even though we all break it. Castling, okay, that's allowed, the computer will let me, and castling for white, and now the knight comes out. Now I'm not saying this is what you should try to emulate, but this is generally what I'm trying to show you. There's Queen D2, Queen D7, okay, and then we're almost developed for both sides. Now what is developed is where these rooks are connected, okay. These rooks are both saying g'day, and this rook's saying g'day, and this rook's saying g'day, and this rook's saying g'day, and this is almost to developed stage until we move a rook to a central file or something like that. But this is practically almost, the opening is over. So we now go into the middle game. Now sometimes someone's still in the opening, they're dragging the chain, they're moving pawns like I'm known to do, and yet they're not developing. Now developing is simply this. Developing in chess is developing my pieces primarily, not my pawns. So I can only develop pieces, and castling, by the way, is not developing, but it's A2 developing, where my rooks are looking at each other and saying g'day, like I previously said. So developing is to do it as quickly as possible, even though we always break the rules, to develop as quickly as possible so that we're going to be able to go from this opening to the second stage of the game of only 3 stages to the middle game. And so the opening is to get all our pieces out expediently. Now, if we muck around and we try to attack things with our knights and our bishops and all this stuff, then we waste time where our opponent might be getting all ready and putting their armor on, and we're still sleeping in our tent, asleep. And so we can know the ramifications of that are going to be not probable favourable to ourselves, but to our opponent. So we've got the stage of the opening, so we want to not move a piece like a knight or a bishop or queen more than once in the opening. We can do that in the middle game. So then we get from the opening to the middle game. So opening is basically get your pieces out as quickly as you can and try to think about what's the best way for me to move my pieces out, because sometimes your opponent will inhibit or stop or prevent you being able to freely do what you want to do in chess. It's just the way it is, because they're trying to win or play a good game as well. And so when both players are playing against each other, one might be trying to do something and prevent the other player from doing the same thing. So if we get to the middle game, the second stage of 3 stages in the game, then our opponent is still dragging behind, then we're going to have an advantage. But if we then go to sleep on the position, if we just sort of like lay on our laurels and just think, oh, she'll be right, like the rabbit and the turtle, or the hare and the tortoise. If we just go to sleep and think, oh, we got this race won, we don't have to do anything, then our opponent might catch up, like that in that famous story. And so we have to make sure that we are efficient and we operate our position well without being conceited and all that sort of thing. We have to sort of keep on at it and keep trying to improve our position and somewhat. So that's also what the middle game is all about. So here we've got the middle game, and if I am correct, it's actually black's move here, although I find it a bit hard to understand, but I think it's black's move here. Might not be. No, it's not. I thought it was a bit hard to believe. So we've got the middle game now. Okay. Now, I quite often like to look at what the pawns are doing, specifically pawns in the centre. These are pawns in the centre. These pawns are mainly the central pawns, because these 4 squares here are the sort of centre, the main centre, okay, just like the centre of the board. They are the 4 squares, and there's not one particularly greater than the other, even though white has the advantage of first move, giving white a bit of an advantage over black. So these are the 4 squares here, they are the centre, and this in the middle of these 4 squares is the heart of the very centre. But obviously we can't put a pawn or piece there, we can't. So these we'll have to make do with are the 4 central squares. These here, this square here is the outer centre. And if you imagine a soccer field and you're on a soccer field playing soccer, if you're the striker, which I wasn't allowed to be because I wasn't good enough, I was just a wing. If you're in the centre, usually the ball gets sent your way from the flank, whether you're the left centre forward or the right centre forward or the striker as it's called. So if you're in the centre, you often have a lot more play with the ball and all that sort of thing. Because you're in the centre, you can divert your attention to either the left or the right in soccer or any other sport similar to soccer with the soccer field. So whereas the wing, usually, sadly for me, because I was the wing in soccer, the left wing, I would be sending the ball towards the centre, to where the centre striker or the centre forward was, and I would be with the left wing and another player would be the right wing, and they'd be meeting the left wing and I'd be meeting the right wing. Well, that's sort of like this in chess too. So we've got the main activity is primarily in the centre. It's easier for me to move knight from here, the king side sort of thing, if you can understand, to the queen side from the centre. So here it can go to the queen side even though the queen's in the way, whereas it can't go to the king side, queen side as quickly here because it's 2 moves away at least. It's 1, 2, and in this position we can't really get to the queen side very quickly with this knight if we wanted to, because the bishop's in the way, and if we go here we're going to get chopped by the knight or the bishop or the pawn and that sort of thing. So this is sort of like roughly the middle game, because we've got all our pieces out, they're all ready for action, they're not out too far in the fray. So now we can start to think about what is called a plan in chess. Well, we all know what a plan is, of course. So in chess, at the stage of the game, very simply put, this is the stage of planning. Okay, now I'm just going to play some moves just for fun. I'm just playing randomly, completely randomly, but I'm probably trying to play better for white, but I'm not playing very well. But anyway, so we're going to just change this from a middle game to an end game. So the middle game is strategical, maneuvering, attacking, defending. Usually they go hand in hand, attacking and defending, and counter-attacking and that sort of thing, and planning. So in chess, it's a good idea to have at least a bad plan is better than a no plan. So to have a plan in chess in the middle game is very important. Once you're starting to do campaigns, or you might be just going to think, I'm going to attack on the king side. So you might on black's king side if you're white, and vice versa. If you're black, you might be thinking, I'm going to attack on the king side on white's king side, which is where the king is. Actually on the same side as the king side. This is the king side because that's where the king come from, the square here, and this is the king side for black. Even if the king's over here, this is still the king side, even though this is going to probably confuse me. This would be where the king is, even though it's not on that side. But don't worry about that too much, because I wouldn't want to have you worry about that. So this is now what we would construe as the end game. Now this is an important part to go, if you want to be basic about it. The end game, which is there's not many pieces left on the board, so it's not really likely that either side is going to be able to checkmate their opponent, because there's no real pieces left on the board, even though we have got equalness to the queen of 2 rooks. which are, you know, worth 10, and a queen's worth 9, and a bishop each. So this is the sort of an atypical endgame position that we could say this is the endgame now. So what is the endgame in chess? It's a time where you might only have 2 pawns versus 1 pawn left. If we want to do that, I can easily generate that for you. Now I'm threatening checkmate, but if I move, if black moves up here or moves up here, and I do some stupid move here like this, there's checkmate in 2 moves here, because it's check. The rook is attacking the white king, and the only move, the king can't move anywhere. Pawns, nothing can move in the way. I can't take the piece. I can't put a bishop here or anything like that, or a knight from here to here or something like that. So it's check, and I can't do anything about this check other than this rook can come back. That's the only move possible on the whole board other than resigning. And sadly for white, after rook here, if black doesn't watch it, they can checkmate white by rook takes rook checkmate. So this is into an endgame position, but that's not a very good move for white to play because it would be construed a blunder. Same with here with is if black goes here, okay, and black plays carelessly here themselves, then this is checkmate for white on the spot directly. But they're not very good moves to play. So here we've got 6 pawns versus 6 pawns for black. So black has 6 pawns and white has 6 pawns. So this would be considered, it's called a rook and pawn endgame. Now the thing about endgames is you go pawn hunting. You want to get pawns because pawns are prospective queens. As I've said, you can have officially you can have for black 9 queens, and you can have 9 queens for white, but that would mean that you have to promote every single pawn of your camp, your initial camp. They all have to be able to promote to the 8th rank to become a queen if they want to, or they can become a knight or a bishop or a rook, not a king and not a pawn. They're not allowed to stay to being a pawn. So this is the endgame. So we've got just simple, real simple, opening, middle, end, opening, middle, end, opening, middle, end, opening, middle, end, just like a sermon. So we've got the openings, the opening of a essay, we've got the middle, the body of it, and then we've got the end of the essay, in English of course. So here, this is a pawn grabbing situation, and you've got to be very, very careful that you don't start losing pawns, because these pawns become queens. So if it's black to move, or it's white to move now, if it's white to move, we could play rook here, which is threatening rook check mate. So black would have to do something about it. So this would be the move. Something like this, or here, or here, or here. Why are these moves any good for white? Black, I mean. Because this, if rook check now, we can just kick king up here. We've got what's called a luft for our king. Same with if this be the case. This is a luft for the king too. L-U-F-T. So if we go rook check, it's no good for, it's no checkmate. The king can come here. Now notice all these pawns of black are defended. Okay, the rook's not defended. The rook is freestanding. It hasn't got anything protecting it, but all the pawns are. And in the endgame, you really have to look after your pawns. And if your pawns down, you don't, it's not very good. And if your pawn's up, it's pretty good. But what is it all about these pawn things is that if you've got more pawns than your opponent, because this is pretty equal, this position, but white has to be careful. There's after king here. If white just doesn't watch it, okay, they play here. Well, this is checkmate, of course. We're not going to talk about that, so we'll just go pawn here first, okay? Rook here is black's move. Now, this is going to win this very important pawn for white if black is allowed to take it. At the moment, it's very hard to defend it with the rook because the pawn takes the rook, of course. So this rook is attacking this pawn. What is white going to do about it? Can't move the king there on time. It's too many squares away, and it can't get past this rook on this line anyway, which this rook is on an open file. Okay, this is on an open file, this rook, and so is this rook on an open file. That is closed because there's pawns on that file. If there's a pawn here for white, I don't want to get into that too much. So this is attacking the pawn on a4. Now white could say, well, I'll play here, and actually that's not bad, because now white is threatening two pawns of black at the same time. So black would need to choose, and would probably want to play rook takes here, because if they play king here, then white wins a pawn. And now if we count the pawns, we've got 6 pawns still for white, and this pawn is very hard to stop, even though it's not totally difficult for black to stop this pawn from marching all the way to its primal square of a8, becoming a queen preferably, or rook, or bishop, or knight. Can't be a king, can't be a thing. It has to be one of those things if it goes there, you know, to the 8th rank, which is that square there. But the rook's in the way, of course. So here, white's just taken this pawn here, as black had to defend this. What I wanted to show is not so much the best move here, but how does white, if they want to defend this pawn? Well, we could just take this, which we can't do. So white's going to win this pawn here. But if white wants to defend this pawn on a4 otherwise, in normal circumstances, then the only thing for it is this move here, other than the rook move here, which sort of grabs one of these 2 pawns and ends up still equal. So rook here, pawn here, rook here, and the rook can't defend this, of course, because it just gets taken. So here, if these were the only pawns on the board, then black's going to win this pawn on what's called a6 by rook b6 takes a6, rook takes a6. So that's the threat. Obviously white can play this as I've aforementioned, but if this is just the pawns, this pawns here and a king each, which we're always going to have a king, then white's going to lose this pawn because they can't do anything about it, even though they can attack black's pawn. If these are the only pawns here, then white has and will just lose one of these, lose their pawn. And so this, if we get this to the ultimate square, which is another case, becomes a queen, and then we've got a huge material advantage, which should win in normal circumstances. given thereof. So here we've got a position that we're just trying to imagine these pawns aren't really here, because we've got this move here which kind of gets equal, even though this probably is a wee bit better for black, because they've got this pawn here that's on its own, whereas these pawns are all facing each other. They're all having to sort of contend for movement, whereas this one hasn't got any pawns in its way if it wants to start trying to walk up the board. But the rook's in the way, of course, at first. So white has black has to try and get this pawn up to here without getting captured by the enemy white rook or enemy white king. Not that it's really an enemy, but you know. So that is, in a nutshell, like you've said about Christianity to me, in a nutshell, this is in a nutshell the concepts of the game of chess, where it has an opening to get your pieces out, the middle game, which is to operate with your pieces in such a way that you generally are attacking or defending or playing centrally, positionally as it's called, or tactically and that sort of thing, trying to set traps for your opponent, or trying to work out where you're going to put your pieces and all that sort of thing, and where your primal position is for your pieces and that. Whereas the end game is to just be blunt, chasing pawns and trying to get as many pawns as you can, and not analysing anymore so much, but more scheming and thinking about where is the best place for my king. And it doesn't want to sit at home anymore, because nothing can checkmate it unless it puts itself in checkmate, like I've shown you before. So the king becomes a piece in the endgame, and the pawns are very important, because if you lose all your pawns and your opponent's got pawns, then you're probably going to lose the game of chess, with all due respect. So there you have it, the three stages of the chess. I'm going to reiterate: the opening, the middle, and the end. Very simple. And the opening is be expedient and quick to get your pieces out and active, so that they're going to be able to cope better if there's any sort of attack, and or repel any sort of attacks. But that's not a foregone conclusion, of course, because they just are better chess players than anyone else. Everyone has opponents that are better than them at chess. That's all there's to it. Doesn't matter where and who you are. And then there's also the personalities of the players. Some players won't be able to play against certain players because they have a different way of playing that they can't cope with, and so they fall to bits. Nemesis and all that sort of thing. And then you've got the middle game, which is campaigns and sort of like going after strategical points and whittling away at them, like siege warfare and all that sort of thing. And then you've got the end game, which is a race to queen a lot of the time, and to get to queen first and be able to ultimately checkmate, which is going to be the end of the game. So we'll just go forward a little bit longer here. And I'm not going to prove my I'm not going to prove anything, but we could just go here and blah blah blah. Now, I'll give you an example, just a wee tactic here. This is a tactic which is quite prevalent, particularly in the middle game, not the end game so much. White plays here, okay, thinking they're just doodling, okay, or here. This would be better than the other move. Or they play like this, okay. Well, I'll show you this. No, I won't show you that. I'll show you this. Now if the rook moves here, then there's a wee tactic here of rook check and either or. If the king takes the rook, a queen check. And you probably know all this. That's alright, I don't mind, because I quite like to teach myself it too, because it's very important. So if the rook goes away, then this is becoming a possibility. So let's say another thing. Say the king goes here. This is another possibility. Say the king goes here. Then white would be met, if they're playing a good player, with this move here. Rook here. Okay. Now, what say you if rook takes pawn? Then this is a one game for black, because now the king has to move out a check, and the result would be losing the rook, as you can see from the red arrow. So black would be a whole rook up for one pawn, and black's going to be able to win this for themselves. So that's a wee trick. And also, if the king moves here now to attack the rook, okay, then we have simply either move the rook. No, we're not moving the rook. We're going to go either rook here. Rook can be a rook, or we're just not trying to be silly. We'll just make that into a queen, which defends the rook on h1, which is, this is the h1 square. So the king cannot go from king g2 takes rook on h1. Cannot happen, because the queen protects it. I'll show you. The computer won't let me do it. And same vice versa. If the rook takes the queen now, then really rook takes rook on a1, and it's basically history, even though it's still needing to be won. Okay, so there I have a session for you. I don't know where you are in chess, but the three principles I like to reiterate are, or the three parts is, of the game of chess. Doesn't matter when it is, because a game of chess can be in the end game just before checkmate in a few moves. I'll give you an example, or even 2 moves. I'll show you the quickest chess game known to mankind, other than the one I played the other day. This is the quickest way. It's called a fool's mate. A fool's mate. So this is really someone really inexperienced or falling around can play. This move, move 1. Move 1 for black, here. Now this pawn here or here, doesn't matter which one, here. And if I get the computer to play here, it's going to force it. You're ready, set. I'm not touching the mouse. Checkmate, and that's checkmate. That's the quickest game of chess possible. One more for you is this. I will now set it up again. New position set up. Reset. Okay. This is another one. This is called a scholar's mate. And these, you can play these work against people. Oops, I played it wrong. I've played it wrong. Bishop here, new main line. We've got knight here, queen here. Okay, now we're threatening, obviously, queen takes pawn, checkmate. So if black's careless here and they play some silly move like d6, and that's checkmate. See, checkmate. So that's called the scholar's mate. And this move equals same sort of idea. And if I get the computer to make a move, I can get it to play this move, force it by pushing the space bar. It's not playing it. Ah, must have it switched off. Queen f7 checkmate. So that's the same. So if black's careless, then they can fall into a scholar's mate. These are very, very fun to play when you're a junior chess player, but they don't work when you get to B, C and A grades and all that sort of thing. They just don't work. They might if the other person's drunk or clowning around or saying, I bet you won't dare to play this or whatever. I don't know. I can't imagine all the variations on that theme. So there you have it. That's my wee little teaching for you. And now I'm going to switch off the engine, which is annoying. Now I'm going to show you some openings in chess. Okay, so new main line. This is one of my favorites for white and black, so I don't care which side I'm on. If I'm black or white, I like this opening. This is called the Spanish opening, obviously because it derives from Spain, or the Ryle appears, and that is the name of the given player that started off in about 1726 or 06 or 1706 or round about that era. So this is the Spanish. Now there's a whole lot of different ways for black to react to this move. This, very popular by the way is this move at the moment with world champions alike. This, everything. There's all sorts of things. This even gets played. This can be played. This can be played. All sorts of things can be played. So this is a finite opening here. Just these three moves, and it's called the ruler pairs. We have other moves that are called, and these are just, don't have to worry about what they're called because it's got nothing to do with it. Then we've got things like this. We've got this, which is called the King's Gambit, because it's on the King's side, and even my juniors picked this. They said, well, that must be the King's Gambit, and the other one is the Queen's Gambit. This is a King's Gambit, so that's just what it's called, don't matter what it's called. And there's also the King's Gambit accepted, and there's the King's Gambit declined. So obviously this is a King's Gambit pawn, the pawn here. So if it gets taken by black, it's called the accepted line, and this, or similar, is the declined. It's not been accepted. Same way as d4, move 1, d5, c4, notice I'm using the names of the square, c4, this is called, by my juniors who didn't know this, the Queen's Gambit. So this is the gambit of the Queen's pawn, not the Queen's pawn, that's the Queen's pawn, but this is a gambit. And this is the Queen's Gambit accepted, which is called QGA, by those that are in the know, or QGD, which is declined, of course. So these are just a couple wee small openings, and so I want to just impress upon you some opening moves for white. They could be this move. which I've just shown you. They can be this move. They can be this move. They can be this move. They can be this move, which is called the Retty's opening. And that is called the Retty's opening because it's named after Richard Retty. This is the Sikorski's opening, or something to that effect, because it's named after that player. This is called 1c4, the English, which is obviously where the derivation of that came about, is from the English. I supposedly purport to you. This is simply just 1d4 or the queen pawn opening, okay? And this is a king's pawn opening. So this is called a king's pawn opening, but it's up to black to what is actually going to be what the opening is called. So if black plays this move, it would be called, in most cases, the French defense, which we all know where the French defense derives from. And this is the center counter gambit, or the Scandinavian center thrust counter gambit. So we can gather where that derivation comes from. This is called the Sicilian defense. Okay, now, so on move one, that's quite popular with people that like tactical, aggressive type of games. This is the Caracan. Okay, now that goes back a wee way. The Caracan, and the idea of this is it's a little bit more slower, even though we cannot underestimate it, because it's got advantages and disadvantages, and that's what happens in chess. There's a lot of that goes along. You get disadvantages and you get advantages. You might get a good pawn structure, you might not have a good pawn structure. You might have a pawn all on its own with no pawns around, and your opponent might have their pawns way better than yours. So that's just a quick sort of indication of some openings, just real basic, which I probably don't know any deeper than the first couple of moves anyway. This is called the Latvian gambit, and there are ways for black and white to go wrong here from this very position, even though only 2 moves have been played for both sides. So I hope that that inspires you somewhat to have a look into chess. I hope I've done all that, and so I have. And so thank you very much, and I hope you got to watch that. I don't know how long it is. Yeah, getting on to 53 minutes, but you know me.